Next year.
Good evening. Welcome everyone to this webinar. Earth Odyssey has done a series of webinars on people, harmony, nature, human rights, nature rights, and sustainable development. Today we come to perhaps the most important subject, which is education for sustainable development. At the beginning of the millennium, we had a lot of hope, a lot of promises. The year 2020, if anyone went to an optician and the optician told you you have 2020 vision, you can see clearly, well, 2020 turned out the worst year ever. So today we are facing threats of military confrontation between the big powerful nation, economic warfare between the big powerful nations, extinction of species, climate change, and a whole series of problems. If we look at Stockholm 1972, which was the beginning of environment and development concerns, the developing countries said our problem is development. Developed countries said our problem is environment. This divide is still with us. Today we have, after the Stockholm, we had Rio 92, we had Johannesburg 2002, which talked about sustainable development. It was Brundtland who in 1987 defined what sustainable development is, and we are still arguing about it. We have climate 2030 goals, and today we have sustainable 2030 goals. The fundamental two things that came out of Rio was the polluter pays principle and differential responsibility. And no one wants to talk about it. We're talking of climate change, who is producing what emission, and 20%, 80% ratio remains. The richest country produce 20% and the poorest 80% and bear the brunt. So the core element of sustainable development, sustainable living, sustainable lifestyles is education. Education, education. We have all the scientific knowledge, practical knowledge of what sustainable development is. We need to find the commitment to make it a reality. So where do we start? You need to educate the parents to teach their children, teachers to school in the schools, professors in the universities, governments, business, and civil society in the workplace. We need to empower the educators. We need to educate the educators to have the information of how to make sustainable development a reality. But that will take us decades. It's not something we can do in a year or two. So what is the highest priority we have right now? Right now, the priority is Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 2030. Let us use this decade to empower the youth. If in every country, 4 times a year, a period of 3 months, you empower 20 youth. In a year, you will have 80 youth. Over the decade, 800 youth working side by side on the ground on actions for sustainable development. And the same youth will impart the knowledge to their parents, impart the knowledge to their siblings. We need to think seriously, and we are not doing this on the ground level. And that should be our highest priority. Now we start our webinar with someone who has spent a few years on the ground with SDG implementation. And that is Kehkashan, who is the founder of Green Hope Foundation. And she probably, unlike anyone else, as a youth, has the direct experience of doing this on the ground with over 100,000 people. And we are concerned that so many youth organizations wanting to attend the United Nations meetings, finding out about the United Nations politics, the intricacies, and the youth, we keep saying the youth have the passion. Let's mobilize the youth. Let's hold the arm of the youth for actions on the ground. And if you miss this decade of opportunity, it will be too little, too late. Kehkashan, I'm so happy you are with us, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shah, and good morning, everyone from Toronto, Canada. And yes, this is really the last decade of action. And, you know, our education systems, I think, are too traditional and still rooted in colonialistic norms, and that seek to more divide using ill-defined performance metrics rather than to elevate and foster equality. And they're really the product of a regime that puts economic growth as the prime indicator of progress and success, but not well-being and empathy. And this COVID-19 pandemic has starkly illuminated the fallacies of our current education system that's ignored the glaringly obvious fact that human systems are deeply interconnected with our natural systems. And at the same time, they do not educate us to recognize, to respect, or nurture this interdependency. So it's really no wonder then that even though we live in the age of technology and innovation, we've failed to provide this early warning of this zoonotic disease that's first exposed how human-caused environmental degradation and destruction of wildlife habitats has increased human risk of exposure to new infectious diseases, and then also exacerbated inequalities. And now, as countries actually emerge from lockdowns, there's fortunately a realization that we cannot bring about any change unless we bring about a new normal and adopt different approaches. So apex multilateral organizations like the United Nations and all of its processes must drive this agenda, at the core of which must be bringing about a change in the way we perceive and disseminate education, really transforming it from its colonial origins and enabling its rooting back with nature, spirituality, and humanity. So basically, it must foster the development of sustainable competencies like systems thinking, strategic vision, learning green skills that enable coping with uncertainty and working within complexity to ensure, at a minimum, pro-environmental behaviors and a green job-ready workforce that's capable of helping us transition to a greener economic model. And that is exactly what Green Hope Foundation does across its 25 country chapters with over 140,000 people. And we see the benefit of using education for sustainable development as that transformative tool to really engage and empower young people, over 140,000 young people, to become empathetic global citizens who are implementing the SDGs in their own zones of influence. And just to cite a few examples of the impact of education for sustainable development at Green Hope Foundation, In Liberia, we have installed solar panels in the homes, school, and community center of a village. There, in just last week, we installed solar street lights to ensure that the girls have safe spaces to go to school at night for computer literacy that, in turn, is powered by clean energy. In Canada, our members are working on urban sustainability by growing their own food on their balconies to address food insecurity and the importance of eating locally grown, seasonal, organic food. So this reduces their footprint as well. And just to mention, Green Hope Foundation has actually partnered with Canada's largest school board, the Toronto District School Board, providing free environmental education to their students. The concept of urban sustainability is also been undertaken by our members in Dubai too, where they're growing mandarins, chilies, eggplants, cucumbers on their plots of land. And they're also conducting recycling campaigns regularly within their own communities. And in fact, they actually conducted one just yesterday to raise awareness about the importance of responsible consumption and production and upcycling. And in India as well, our members are growing their own food and also conducting regular beach cleanups along the South Indian coastline for the protection of marine life. In Oman, our members are using education for sustainable development through art and also art from waste to teach children about the SDGs in a fun and interactive way about protecting the environment and giving back to the community. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is actually our newest chapter, our members are now working extensively on urban and municipal waste management, tree planting, growing their own food, composting. In Bangladesh, we have installed deep bore tube wells, toilets, and rainwater harvesting systems for several villages there. This ensures safe spaces. Sanitation and hygiene enables girls and women to go to school. And a lot of them didn't go to school before because there were no toilets there. And the rainwater harvesting system that we've installed there is particularly effective because those areas are really prone to heavy rainfall. So this system actually is really climate smart. And at the same time, we're also distributing livestock, poultry to the women and educating them on organic farming. So really, at the end of the day, we must all be the ones driving that transformational education change that disrupts the status quo. And, by bringing about the change, we're empowering stakeholders, all of whom we work with women and girls, refugees, children, and really the vulnerable, because education will only become transformative when it brings to light the insights, the perspectives, and experiences of the oppressed, the disenfranchised, and unseen communities to truly leave no one behind and ensure a life of dignity for all. And there's so much negative energy in our world today. So as young people, we need to be more empathetic. It's our responsibility to rise above all of that, bring in more positive energy, and solve the world's problems using education for sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Kehkashan, I'm lost for words because what you have just said is exactly what the United Nations and the member states of the United Nations should be doing on the ground. Youth working with the local community, youth empowered that they can contribute. And my question, I know you have to leave for another urgent meeting, but my question to you, why is this model and experience not being highlighted in the battle of SDGs?
That's a really important question. And honestly, it baffles me as well as to why education for sustainable development is not given its due diligence, because that is really at the core of what we must be focusing on and teaching children from a young age about the world's challenges, and not just waiting until they're 18 to tell them about some of the world's problems, and not that won't allow them to recognize what they can do at that age. And I think that a very common thing that happens in our world is that we are so used to just talking about our problems, but no one actually is very few people are actually able to turn that talk into action. And I think that action is also not propagated enough to say that we need action more than just talking about it. So yeah, I think that there is more of a change now than when I started out, like 13 years ago, talking about education for sustainable development, trying to implement it on the ground. And what we've seen in our work all across the world is that the most vulnerable communities and marginalized communities are the ones who are actually adopting education for sustainable development more so than those who are actually responsible for our world's greatest challenges. So it is my hope that it goes from the ground up, that we are able to bring about that change and really change our education systems to promote well-being as a measure of success rather than just economic development and monetary. And I think David Orr talks about this a lot when he talks about the success indicators. And I think that that is something that our education systems can definitely benefit from.
Kehkashan, I want to say something before you leave.
Okay, let us change the word education for sustainable development and call it actions for sustainable development, because that's a priority and that's what you're doing. And we will be very happy as Earth Odyssey to work with you, Kehkashan, to make a case to the United Nations. We publicly made this case. David?
Yep, Kehkashan. I produced the SDG Awards at the UN during the 2018 General Assembly. I wish that I had known you then, because I would have given you an award. Even then, the UN was already beginning to migrate from the word or concept of awareness to the concept of activation and action. How would you suggest that pervasive education for tomorrow's youth, in order to generate tomorrow's leaders, engender more action and activation on the part of your and subsequent generations?
That is another really important question. What I have seen benefits a lot is that so many of our education systems, they talked about how they're colonial in structure, and that still continues to this day, about really implementing the Western ways of thinking on everyone else. And I think what would benefit, what all institutions actually in the United Nations can definitely take the lead in this as the world's apex institution, is to ensure that the traditional knowledge is also normalized. I think that's like really important. Using indigenous knowledge, the indigenous worldviews, local worldviews, allowing people to understand that there is more than one way of educating, and education is a lifelong experience, not just something that is within the four walls of a classroom. And it goes beyond that. Classroom is extremely important, and it goes beyond that as well to really become empathetic global citizens. So I'll stop there.
David, I'm going to ask you to follow with your statement. David, you have the floor, and we really want to global mental foundation, global governance.
So, Kehkashan, I don't know how much of what my presentation you can hear, but I'm just going to dive in. And my topic is, where do we go today teaching and creating the leaders of tomorrow? So my business card says that I'm an educational warrior and a venture catalyst. By the way, I'm honored to be here with you, Dr. Shah, with Yuri, with Danielius, with all of you. And thank you very much for sharing my acceleration. I have a master's in education using VR and technology for mental health education. My graduate thesis was the use of VR to model family therapy and family systems theory. My undergraduate work was based on the use of Soviet propaganda techniques for improving history and math videos, because the kind of cinema they created called montage actually has the capacity to change the way people see things and change their behaviors without them knowing it. Why am I there? Because I believe that conventional colonial education does not go to where the student is. It comes from where their needs are, their requirements are, and they make their best efforts to address the subset of the 27 different types of learners that are represented in the classroom. My core belief is that most of the world's problems that the SDGs address are actually based on the lack of mental wellness. And I could argue for that, but I'm not going to do that in this phone call. What I've been working on for the last 40 years is a new concept called Scalable Psychology, where we can help all of us cope, all of us address these existential decisions, beginning with our own ecology, our own sustainability, our own quality of life, our own relationships, our spirit and our meaning, so that we can embrace and work with others. Why am I doing this? And I address in my presentation, how does this relate to the future of education, and specifically the education for today's youth and tomorrow's leaders? I'm a very lucky person. I actually know why I'm on the planet, and I've known it a long time. I didn't always know it, but I'm here to help every human being realize their brilliance, their purpose, their mission. Because I believe that when anybody wakes up to their contribution, they become a superhero and a genius, and that is all of us. As for the future of education, which was part of the challenge that Dr. Shah asked me to address, I'm looking at the way that the nature of jobs are changing or dissipating. Technology will soon be considered a species indigenous to itself. I'm still contemplating that one. One of my ventures is called EIC Earth, where we're creating communities to take people and help scaffold them towards being valuable innovators, no matter what their background is or what their conditions are. And we're doing it in the context of where technology is going to be 30 years from now, with severe Asperger's somewhere on the scale, having more and more control over our life and taking over more and more of our jobs. So where do we go with respect to jobs or employment or the use of our time? Well, I believe that jobs are becoming gigs. Now, I've been in a gig economy for 36 years. I haven't had a job since 1984. I was a waiter finishing up my thesis at Berkeley a long time ago. Gigs basically required new skills, which bring about the notion of just-in-time learning. People that hire people in gigs also represent communities that have specific needs, whether they're corporations or companies or governments or institutions or nonprofits. Every community is an entity that requires certain skills, competence, and a speed to being valuable. And that means that skilling, upskilling, just in time are essential capacities. People like Danielius, who will be speaking a little bit later on with BITDegree, my friend Aziz Ahmad with Coders Trust, they are now building these ecologies that handshake to communities, determine what the skills that are necessary are, and figure out how to deliver those skills in a way that's interesting and valuable to the targeted human capital. And then they incent them with badging, with motivation, but as importantly, they handshake with the communities that are going to need them, and they create motivations and incentives and create fun means by which to learn these things and be motivated until such time as you are motivated of your own. And that doesn't necessarily happen with young people. In fact, people aren't really motivated intrinsically till they know why they're here and what their mission is. I was never a great student until I woke up one day and realized why I was on the planet and what I was here for. Suddenly I went from struggling student to a Harvard MIT student with a full scholarship. I promise you, I struggled with all the same things that everybody else struggles with. Those that are not trained from birth to excel because they come from maybe a colonial past or from a first generation that comes from a challenged environment where you must get educated so you can do better for your family. The nature of life is changing itself with all of these existential crises that we're approaching, and the opportunity for evolution of our species is on the near horizon. What we have to do when it comes to youth, and I'll get there in a minute, is really think about where the world's going to be in 30 years from now or even 10 years from now. Something along the lines of universal basic income or social support, much like you say in healthy cultures such as Scandinavia and in some places in Northern Europe, where people can get what they need to survive. but you can't thrive until you wake up to what it is that you want to do. In other cultures, you have young people of all ages having the deep desire to make any money they can. They're not encumbered with the hubris of generation after generation of wealth where the motivations change. And you're not driven by something that's much more material because your culture has matured to the point where the basics of life and survival and of thriving have gone. Young people of all ages are not taught what life is and that we can be superheroes and stars. But education, as it normally is today, is crumbling. Danielius and I spoke last week, and he mentioned the statistic 50% of all colleges and universities in the United States will be bankrupt in 10 to 15 years due to disruptions in higher education. I looked that statistic up, and there's a long list of why this is going to happen. Because universities are businesses. They pursue profit over truly focusing on evolving their human capital. They're too expensive to attract all but the wealthiest folks, with a few exceptions here and there, who truly aren't motivated to help others. The ecosystem, the corporate communities are also undermining the very colleges that they fund now because they have more explicit just-in-time needs. So large corporations are rapidly developing their own universities. Procter & Gamble University is very famous. GE University is very famous. The landscape is changing towards just-in-time skills development and just-in-time community enhancement and augmentation, where you're trained, you're given the jobs, and you develop the ecosystems with your fellow students to support each other and build communities. And the last problem is, and I'm going to segue to youth now, is that young people really aren't necessarily capable of fully understanding the beauty and value of education when they're young. And in fact, it's said that young men don't fully biologically complete their psychological development from a physiological perspective until about 25. And I hate to say this, but women typically are a little bit ahead of them at around 21 or 20 or so. I don't remember the exact figures, but young people are not necessarily motivated yet intrinsically because they're still maturing in their ecology. And they don't know what they want to do because they're not taught to believe they can not only do whatever they want if they really try hard, but that's important to think those thoughts. So how do we address education of today's youth and tomorrow's leaders? And so, the question is, how do we motivate young people? How do we help them build those motivations? And how do we serve tomorrow's youth today and today's youth? So I think probably the most important thing we need to think about is, how does the brain actually work in youth and in the young of all of us? Well, every one of you on this webcast right now, wherever you are, typically operates in the same way. There are 5 to 7 problems that each of us has at any given time in our life. They are called problems, but they're relevancies. And if something isn't relevant, it just doesn't go into the brain. It doesn't work. A teacher's job is to make sure that that geography class or that math class is somehow important enough because of implications or the magic of a great teacher or whatever the environmental requirements are, whatever motivation they're using, so that the person will try to learn it. We have to find ways to make relevance, and make something relevant, which is why we then have to go into another consideration, which is why I went into movies and VR as a way of educating. And I'm almost done for those that I haven't managed to bewitch with my trail of logic here. We have to figure out how people learn. And so we need to replicate reality, which is why VR, software that's interactive, and other concepts, movies that replicate reality, become increasingly important. We need emotion, we need relationship. So we need to think about how to teach. And I will close by saying, we have to understand that young people that we're trying to reach may not yet be inspired by the clarity of who they are, why they are here yet. And so we need to, and things like empathy, compassion, even logic are not fully manifest through our bodies and our brains yet. So we have to scaffold people. We need to go with where young people are and teach them that these considerations, meaning and mental health and environment, shapes who we are, but every one of us is perfect because every one of us not only has a unique genetic DNA, but an experiential DNA. We need to meet kids with where they are, where their passions currently lie, and evolve there. We're our people. We have to meet them finally with love, because love conquers and embraces all. We must do this from a mental health and psychological perspective because our existence depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David, for very comprehensive. I want to make a point that we, the adults of this world, want to pursue AI, robotics, space exploration. In 1969, when the man landed on the moon, Kennedy said, "Small step for man, a big leap for mankind." President Nyerere of Tanzania said, "Industrial countries are going to the moon. We still are not going to the village." And that's the world today. We still don't know how to go to the village. So the important thing is, you are right, that youth have to learn this, learn that. Youth have the passion, youth have the innocence, and the youth eyes and ears are open. And we really need to find a way to hold their hand and channel them in the direction in which you said. And I think that is the most critical thing. And you are right, the digital revolution, let's use it not for social media, but for e-learning, which brings us to the next speaker. Danielius, we are very happy to have you with us. Danielius was declared as the world innovator in e-learning. And we not only are happy you are with us in the webinar, we would very much, like David, like Kehkashan, to be partners with our effort over the next 3 years to 2022, which will be the 30th anniversary of Rio, to move forward. Thank you. Danielius, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor and pleasure to address all of you. And I'd like to say that I've been to Rio Plus 20 in 2012. And actually, I was highly disappointed with the outcome because I saw that the world leaders are not taking enough measures to make something happen. Now we are almost 10 years since then, and not much has changed. And as usual, we are talking that the young people should be responsible for leading the change, for being the catalysts of change. I have no doubt that this will happen, but I don't think that we have the luxury of time to wait until then. Because if you think about those young leaders, it will take another 10 or 20 years until they are in power. And then they'll have to start a cycle of educating the entire society. I think we are at a COVID level event in our sustainable development and crisis. And therefore, like with COVID, I guess everyone has to learn what sustainable development is. I think it's unacceptable that majority of today's adults have no clue what is happening with sustainable development or what are the pressing issues. Therefore, I hope that soon enough, we will recognize sustainable development as the crisis as powerful as COVID, and everyone will have to learn how to deal with it. Like if we are dealing with COVID by wearing masks or reading all the news about vaccination, etc. So, in order to prepare us, if there is such an awareness, I guess a lot of things will come into places, and will manage to mobilize as a human race and then save the earth. However, until we get to that point, the most prudent way to educate the adult learners is by training the trainers. But those trainers should be part of every single organization. So what do? How do we managed to spread the knowledge throughout the entire world through all the organizations. So probably many of you have heard about this triple bottom line and similar concepts, and they actually work, but they work not at the significant enough scale, and usually they do not trickle down to every employee. I believe that we now need a new global organization that would be similar to Scouts, and without having affiliations to the Scouts themselves, but an organization that would train the trainers, train the leaders, and an organization that could accept anyone and everyone, and would help them to raise through the ranks of the people who understand the issue of sustainable development and what needs to be done. The issue is super complicated, and therefore not everyone is capable of actually understanding it in its entire complexity. Therefore, we have to have the leaders, have the middle management, and have the followers who can be this global network that can make the change in all of the organizations, in an entire population. And luckily, we have now these technologies of internet, and therefore education has become much easier compared to what it was. We do not longer need to do live one-to-one or one-to a few people trainings. We can have massively open online courses and teach hundreds of thousands of people. We can have certification programs that are digital and credible, therefore, and help people to recognize their skills and actually gamify that skills attainment in sustainable development issues or resolution of them, and in this way to show off their status in our society. The badge of gamification, or any kind of badge, helps us as humans to differentiate from others and get the social respect. And this is an innate feature of humans. Therefore, we have to play to the weaknesses and the strengths of humans if we want to get the attention of the world's population. So I believe that online education has the tools today to create a new global organization and motivate people to learn about sustainable development and solve those problems. All we need now is a critical mass of decision makers, of global leaders, of organizational leaders, to push people into awareness of such an organization, and then big changes will follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. You mentioned the luxury of time. In reality, we have only the lifespan of the youth alive today, because by 2070, 2090, it will be too late. And really, that's a challenge. The question is, e-learning is the only way to teach parents, teachers, professors, governments, and business, because they have no time to attend classes. And we need to mobilize e-learning from them, apart from the youth. And that is the challenge. And that's an area that we really want to work with you, because this, when you look at the elders, the wisdom people, what we call ourselves, we are not doing enough to realize that it is the youth which has to be. It's not enough to say empower the youth. It's not enough to say inspire and empower them. We need to give them the tools and the means to be able to do what they have a passion and the innocence to do. So we look forward, Danielius, to work with you. And we have next a person who has been in Nigeria on the ground. Samuel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good day, everybody. Hope you can hear me.
Samuel, even last week, was meeting with the ministers, asking for action on climate change and climate action, actually, not for climate change. And he's a warrior on the ground. Samuel, You have the floor.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me. It's really an honor to be here again. As you rightly spoke, yes, I was the Minister of Environment of my country last week in Abuja to talk about climate education. And then today is really resonating stuff that we're also talking about education and also the practical approaches implemented in the SDGs. So reading through the memo I saw and also going through most of the things we learn in school, I think it's the right time for we to be more practical than theory in all our learnings, especially in schools. Let's take for instance, there's an article I wrote that I won the first runner up in the article. It's called The African Child. And in the article, I highlighted many things that is wrong with our educational system that should be corrected, especially in the theory aspect, where a child learns all about theory and goes out to the real world without understanding what the real world is all about. So in theory, tell a child, well, after studying this course, you graduate, you go out, you get a work of your choice, you become a good or you become a rich person. But that is not how it is in the real world. So a child studies, and after the studies, he goes out, and going out, he becomes more frustrated and causes more harm to the environment and even to our climate. So you see a child that was not properly given a sound education about sustainable environmental practices. So he goes out and engage due to need for money and need for funding. He goes out and engages in oil bunkering and illegal mining, gas flaring and all that just to survive. And this is what is currently happening in our society every day. In River State, there's what we call STUT, which is basically seeing dark particles on the air, coming from the air and all that. So it's something that has really, really affected us a whole lot in our country here in Nigeria, especially in River State, where there is a whole lot of oil spillage. And I want to talk about our educational system using climate education, because somebody posted something yesterday to my attention, and he was talking about a whole lot of insecurity in Nigeria. And I'm trying to tell him that, do you know that this insecurity can be likened to climate change? And he was asking me, how do I know about that? And I told him something. I said, well, if we have a change in climate, in weather condition, it can also influence a whole lot of things, leading to droughts, famine, migration. So when you have insecurity, first factor is migration. And what is the cause of migration? Now, if we can be able to teach people on sustainable environmental practice in school, giving them practical steps on how to go about it to promote sustainability in their environment, in their homes, in their lifestyle, is going to go a long way to mitigate the conflict problems we are having in countries. Because if you look at countries that are at war or at conflict with one another, try to study the etymological roots of that conflict, you can be able to liken it to migration, where a particular region migrated to this other region due to one issue or the other. Basically, must be a climatic issue. So most of the climatic issues that has led to migration, we have drought, we have disasters, we have wildfires, we have gas flare, we have oil explosion. So most of these things has led to migration. And if people were given the right consent or the right concept why people should be migrated, and also giving them the right opportunity to engage in sustainable environmental practice in the region they are migrating to, it will lead to less harm and less damages of our own lives and our own environment. I'm an expert of loss and damage, represented UNGO on the UNFCCC platforms on L&D. And there's a whole lot of things that we have to talk. We're talking about loss and damage, not just of properties, but lives importantly, and also destruction of our biodiversity, which basically has caused a whole lot of harm in our ecosystem, leading to degeneration of our ecosystem. And I believe if our educational system can get it right, we just have to adopt climate literacy. We just have to adopt sustainable environmental practices, incorporate into the SDGs. Now, the SDGs gave us climate action. That is goal 13. The SDG gave us life on land. But that's something we can incorporate in the SDG, which is sustainable environmental practices. Because while the SDG teaches us how to promote climate action is still lacking in the aspect of promoting sustainable environmental practices by telling people, well, all right, this is what you need to do to be sustainable. In as much as they have provided a whole lot of things for us to adopt on. But if we don't know sustainable environmental practice, especially that resides in our environment, we are going to be causing harm to our environment every day. Let's say, for instance, a child that is in the local community that knows about climate action, but doesn't know about sustainable environmental practices. And the child tried to plant trees. Okay. Now, one day the child may wake up and basically he has nothing to sustain himself for. He goes out in the wild, gets a wild animal that basically may soon go into extinction, and kill the wild animal and basically sell it off or eat for food. Now, you are already sending a species to extinction. And the climate action does not actually tell you, do not send wild species to extinction, but it tells you biodiversity. So if we can bring the concept of sustainable environmental practices to local communities in their own local understanding, it's going to go a long way to promote sustainability, not just of life, of land, of biodiversity, but of the ecosystem as a whole, which encompasses the whole human inhabitants, earth, and activities. So I think I'm going to stop here for now. If there's anybody with a question, thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. You are exemplary youth of the voice of Africa in terms of actions. Let me say that you mentioned promotion of SDG for climate. We have no time to promote SDG. And what you are doing is not promoting, you are working with the local people in implementation. So call it actions. We want to promote SDGs. That we should have done in the last 5-6 years. We did actions today. And you are a shining example of it. And the second point you made about education reforms. We don't need an education reforms. I'm sorry. You need an education revolution, because the education we get today, work hard from nursery to primary to secondary to college to university, to get a good job and live a modern lifestyle of materialism, power, and greed, and destroy the world with it. And this education system, what Kehkashan called colonial, I call it traditional, needs a total change, because 21st century definition of education is different from the 1948 human rights definition of education. And those are important factors. But thank you so much. And please, 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 from West Africa to East Africa to South Africa and to North, spread this message. Thank you, Samuel, for being you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am now going to call upon an earth warrior, environmental. At a tender age, she founded Earth Warrior Environmental Movement. Caroline, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. So I'll start by sharing my screen. This will work. Okay, let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're at. Firstly, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Dr. Shah, for having me and for giving me this opportunity to speak. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Caroline, and I'm a senior at Tahoe Expedition Academy in Truckee, California. I've been involved in climate action throughout high school, and I'm planning to continue this passion as a major in environmental studies in college. So I've participated in a variety of climate action, from climate strikes to conferences discussing our climate. But I believe that one of the most important actions is really being aware of the issue and sharing that awareness with others. So particularly sharing that awareness with our government representatives, because they're ultimately the ones who can make the biggest difference. So recently I passed 2 Schools for Climate Action resolutions in my high school, and I spoke with a member of Congress. So Schools for Climate Action is a nonpartisan grassroots group of students, teachers, to act on climate change. So they work with schools like my school to pass these resolutions declaring climate change as a generational justice issue and declaring that our schools believe in climate change as one of the most pressing issues of our time. And then after passing one of these resolutions in our school, they help students like me to speak to Congress and call on Congress to act on the climate crisis by organizing meetings and congressional meetings where we present our resolutions to local members of Congress. So as I said before, in September of 2020, just this last September, I helped my school pass 2 of these resolutions, and I actually was able to speak with a member of Congress. So my school's already undertaken many eco-related projects, but I realized that through this resolution, there was a way to put our belief in climate action on paper. So after passing these resolutions, we sent them to our representatives, and we actually spoke with Congress. So here's a picture of us. We had to do a virtual meeting. In January, we met with our representative, Tom McClintock. And the meeting, it went interestingly. I think it went pretty well in the end, but Tom McClintock, he's a very conservative representative, and he's actually one of the last members of Congress to not believe in climate change and to not believe that climate change is a real and pressing issue. So when we were in the meeting with him, while we didn't quite get the answer we were hoping for in the meeting, we still believe that it was a success as it taught us how to approach and discuss these issues with members of government and how to lobby on Congress. So pretty much the main reason why it didn't go as we planned is that whenever we brought up climate change or the climate crisis, kind of Representative McClintock kept repeatedly telling us that he doesn't believe that climate change is a pressing issue, so he's not going to act on it. And he kind of repeatedly disregarded our ask for climate action. But still, after the meeting, we decided that while we might not have convinced Representative McClintock to change his climate policy, we did get our voices out, and we brought awareness to the youth that our district, we brought awareness that the youth in our district are concerned about climate change, and we want action. And he even gave his gratitude to us. He said he was uplifting, and he said that he was glad that we came to speak with him and that he wants more youth like us to speak with him. So overall, we believe that it was a success, and that we believe that more students need to discuss issues like this with him, and eventually our government leaders will change their mind and start listening. So I'm just going to do my last slide is finally, what can you do? What can other youth individuals on their own do? So you can pass a resolution like I did, and you can go to schoolsforclimateaction.com and you can just follow the directions on their toolkit, and your schools can pass resolutions and then go and call on Congress. And this is mostly in the US, but they have them worldwide. Schools for Climate Action is an international organization. So you can also just lobby your own government leaders by writing letters or emailing them or calling them. And then lastly, you can join an environmental group. So this can be an environmental group in your school. That's how I started. I started with the Earth Warriors Environmental Club that I founded at my school, and then it just grew from there. So you can start by doing that. Or you can join a local environmental group in your community. I'm sure you can always look up environmental groups in your community, and there always seems to be one available. And especially with everything online nowadays, it's a lot easier to join environmental groups. And then I'm part of 2 international groups. First, Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a group of individuals of all ages that lobby on or lobby for climate action. And then I'm also a part of the Protect Our Planet movement, which connects youth from around the world on climate solutions. So these are both great groups that you can join. You can just look them up and email them and join them. And if none of these are available, then you can create your own group, like how I started. You can gather a group of friends or a group of students or a group of people in your community and educate yourself on this issue to start, and then start educating other people in your community about this issue. And then from there, you can go all different directions. You can write letters, or you can talk to your government leaders. You can hold climate strikes. And really any action is another step towards a healthy and safe planet. So anything you can do will really help. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. The initiative you took to go and brief online with the congressman is tragic. It's tragic. It's a tragedy that the youth of this world, whose future is at stake, have to go and educate a congressman on climate change when he says there is no climate problem. That's the tragedy of it. And I think what the youth we have today have to continue, but you should not be wasting your time with people in power, because remember, in a matter of 3 to 5 years, you will have the power of your thumb, the voting, and you will have the power of your wallet to force governments and business to take action or lose their positions in either. And that is the power the youth have. So thank you, Caroline, for being with us. And we really want you to be our ambassador at Odyssey.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Now we come to the solution in a way. Youth for Planet, youthforplanet.org, and for futures.org. I want to introduce Heiner Benking, who for 50 years, I'm not old, certainly, I don't know about Heiner, but we have both traveled the same journey, been in neighboring rooms, and we never met in this 50-year journey. So I'm still young. Heiner, you have the floor. Heiner.
Yes, I'm here. I'm about to share. I'm in Berlin and I work. I work with a youth organization in Hamburg and Luxembourg doing filmmaking, telling stories of change and looking into the power of cooperative filmmaking and co-creation and going into visualization. That has been presented already another time, but I wanted you to tell that we have to increase our imagination and our powers to share, because I think there have been so many education reforms. We need a learning and sharing revolution. So I like the warrior you mentioned before me. So I think we have a very steep task, because Einstein said we need to come to not only to a new thinking and doing, but without the old models and the old means which got us into the problem, which are flat and dualistic. I'm not going into that further, but tell you I've been this, how do you say, fighter, and I invite you to look where I am struggling with our mindsets, our paradigms, our prototypes, and this is all in YouTube, so I don't need to go in there. But to really do something different, we have to develop a microscope and a macroscope to see the detail and the big picture at the same time. And I don't see this concept of looking locally, regionally, sectorally, globally, and combining the picture, because the problematique, 50 years ago, the report Global Problematique was written. And I saw that we have to come to new solution spaces. And that's where I'm working with, and I've been building in an exhibition on challenges to science and politics. That's how it was called 30 years ago. And we forgot at that time the challenges to the humanity and to each individual and each group forming, so to include the I, you, we, they, and others. So I'm working very much with SDGs. We have a Global Commons Alliance within ECOSOC of the United Nations, and I feel there is a tragedy already in the SDG design, because Goal 17 is not only partnerships, but if you read below, it is strengthening the means of implementations. So how to bring solutions together, which are not just for one thing, but meeting goals 3, 5, 7, 8, and 12 at the same time. So I think the title is already wrong. We should strengthen means of implementation and partnerships. What we have experienced the last 5 years is that there was just a fighting over, I'm part of the partnership and I want to get a piece and a project to fulfill a single goal. So we have to really look into out of the box thinking. So not just into my view, but into the view of groups, nations, global. And I did workshops, and out of this, I show sometimes some visualization. This one is from Harry van den Velde from the Netherlands, to show what we mean to bring all cultural expressions together and really make use of virtual realities and augmented and blended realities. Because when the problems are on the meso and macro scale, we cannot continue with our old priming and anchoring in our thinking when we have to make solid in models what the issues are in different sectors, cultures, times. So I worked much on the beginning of computer visualization in the late 70s, early 80s, and we have to come to really support our fantasy and our sharing. And that's why I made this graph, 98, on making sense of virtual and augmented and blended realities to really do this sharing locally and really involve other senses. If we go to the deep ocean or to the animal kingdom, they are very sophisticated. They have infrared, they have sensing, they have many eyes. So I think to really tackle the problems, we cannot do it in sweet isolation just with our senses, but really combine the micro and the meso and the macro, and combine the world and symbol worlds with the context world and with the physical geographical worlds, because there's so much confusion. Everybody is talking, but they don't talk about each other. So I also recommend what I do, looking who is the observer, who is sharing, and can we really create workspaces of the mind? I don't give you time to read this. It's all there for sharing. And this is what we do about learning with inner and outer workspaces and workspaces of the mind and mental models. So you see, just to whet your appetite, that I need visualizers and we need all the arts of filmmaking to really allow us to look on other levels and create models, not just systems, and bring systems. There are many system schools together with many models, like an architect and an artist is using a model to think the issues, the times, and the scales together. So you see only these two wet new editors. Hugo Kückelhaus worked very much on alternative schools, and I looked into the Waldorf school or Montessori and whatever to really tell us that we are lost in isolation and we speak about values, but we forget the context. So this is my approach, getting sometimes to have the big picture and stepping out of the box to integrate the different schools and science systems and models and the library levels like Warburg did. And I think I could go on forever with so many slides I have since so many years that I would really like to just tell you we are not crazy when we are multimodal and use multimedia, because it's only an extended fantasy. So I think it is possible to do that and be really a crazy futurist, but with the feet on the ground, not just with the eyes in the sky. So this is my thing. I didn't look at the watch, but you can give me an indication how much time is still left, Mahendra.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Let me say that the painter Franz Marc said, a picture is arriving at another place. And so videos and also virtual reality pictures we create, if we create them in common frames of references, then we can have a chance to develop an extended, broader reality. And this is what I'm struggling. And with that, I used it already in 91. So this color figures we did here with friends in Helsinki and in Finland in 91. And when we published all that in the old days, all was printed in big books and in libraries, but not in color. So nobody can see anything about it. So please take the daring to do augmented and new things, because the challenges are so gargantuan, so gigantic, that we have to really bring the old and new thinking and tools together, and the joint learning, and not the frontal teaching we normally do in schools, and to combine the director of UNEP in North America, the architect and administrator of Rio 92, Mahendra Nelson, Noel Brown, he said we have to develop and cultivate common frames of references, not go for just one goal or one commission, but really see synoptical the things in a bigger picture. But don't forget the senses, as I mentioned earlier. All our concepts without percepts are meaningless and even dangerous. So the minute is done.
Thank you. Thank you, Heiner. I think we have both, in the last 50 years, attended all the world summits, food security summits. And I think we can be frank. And I take exception with you, because in every summit, every agenda was unanimously endorsed. And the last statement was, we must strengthen the means of implementation. There is no more need to strengthen. The need is deliver the means of implementation. And that's what we have failed for 50 years, and this cannot go on. So when you talk of the microscope, the nasal, and the macrophone, please, this is what the adults of the world, we are holding all the power, and our legacy in this world is our children, our youth. And we need to look in their eyes and say, like the congressman, look into his children or grandchildren or his brother or sister's grandchildren and tell him there is no climate change, which will kill the future of them. So I think it is not about educating the youth. We, the adults of this world, must change our mindsets because we are in this next 70-year period of no return. The tipping point comes after that. Yes, many will survive. Not the people in Miami, but the people in New York or in other higher grounds will survive. But the challenge is for all of humanity. And we cannot take all the species of the world because we are the ones who have destroyed this world. So thank you so far. Now I want to say before I open the floor for discussion, every webinar we've had about 12 webinars, every webinar has got better as we went along the road. And I feel today that we have reached the top of the mountain. We have reached the peak where we know that it is an education. Don't take the revolution word in any negative sense. Education revolution that focuses on actions. And the youth we have heard today, the way that David spoke, the way you spoke, the e-learning from Danielius, we have the power to do this. So let us combine our efforts. Each one of us is working independently, like every NGO and every youth organization is working independently. And I'm so sorry to say, at the risk of my own reputation, that I have talked to 24 youth organization leaders, and their wish is to get a job in the United Nations, put on that suit, get a plush office. And that's a culture that's developing because they are not working together. And yet when you talk to youth, as we talk today, even Danielius, I count as youth, Caroline, Samuel, Kehkashan, the passion is there. Let's not sacrifice that future. Let's, us in the adult world and in the world of politics in the United Nations, it is time to change our thinking of the last 75 years and move the world forward, because without that, there is no hope. But the hope is the youth we heard today. The hope is what each one of you have said. And you talked about visual. This is a powerful tool with e-learning. And that's our co-founder in Earth Odyssey, Yuri Sanada, who has spent a lifetime of innovative sitting in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Yuri, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mahendra. I'm gonna try to share a video. Since you spoke about the video, we are doing a project next year that can may perhaps illustrate what we are talking about here. By the way, thank everybody. I learned a lot. Let's see if I can share this video. Okay, what we do, we production company. We do movies for cinema, for TV, some documentaries. And what we're doing next year is we're starting a project on the Amazon River. And we want to engage the youth, we want to engage the schools, and we want to show them that learning and saving the planet can be a big adventure. So next year we plan to travel the whole Amazon River from the source, the new on the source in the Andes, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. And that will be a scientific team travel with us. But the main thing is going to be using these clean energy boats powered by the sun and by pedal, and built with bioresin and with natural fibers, hemp and flax and other stuff. So we're going to use this expedition, this project that is going to be turned into a TV series, into a movie, IMAX movie, into a learning experience. We intend to engage schools around the world, and they join us and they participate in our little expedition of 6 months on the Amazon to learn about the biodiversity, the necessity to preserve this amazing ecosystem, and how if we destroy the Amazon, we're going to be destroying the world. I mean, there's no recovery if Amazon is gone. It's going to change the climate all over the world. So basically, I just want to say that we are trying to make a project that can really transform people, the way they think, and the way they, and show them possibilities. For instance, that boat we showed, that little slides, and that boat, we're going to be sharing the technology with indigenous and riverside communities, so they can learn how to build their own solar boats and pedal boats, and they don't have to use gasoline anymore. That's very expensive and hard to get in the Amazon. So we can engage the schools and can engage the youth and show them transformation is possible. But I think like this example, we have to do that, like somebody said here, we have to activate them using adventure, using something that they really can relate to and really can get them engaged. And I think like most of the people love adventure movies, adventure stories, the project has to do with adventure. It has to be, like Alfred would say, we are, of course, a metaphor for what we're trying to do. We are a spaceship, this whole planet. We are traveling together. We are crewmates on this planet. We are traveling to the universe, both in space and time. And if we don't learn how to preserve our planet, how to maintain our spaceship, we are going to be destroyed. So that's what we try to do for next year. And on Earth, I'd say, show people how they can, especially the youth, how they can keep good care of their spaceship, the system that is suitable to maintain our life. Because if we destroy it by greedy or for just ignorance, then it's all gone. Then we won't have a spaceship anymore. We won't have a planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. You need to add that we should take a delegation of youth, 12 or 16 for the pedal boats, because they will have the energy to pedal.
Yes.
While you make the video on this trip. So I think we should start thinking about two representatives from each continent or whatever, a formula to have a youth delegation on board. So we come to a point now where also we have more than 100 people online. And while we have talked among ourselves, I'm sure their thinking is very similar to us. And the message to them that please, having heard this, we will summarize this on our website. We need your partnership. We need your help. The adults and the youth of the world to come together, because the imperative is we must reach sustainable development in harmony with nature in a matter of decades, no more than the lifespan of the youth today. So now we open the discussion. We still have 15, 20 minutes, and the discussion is open. Please, Heiner.
I would like to give an example of a learning, doing, sharing revolution. Not teaching education, but doing hands-on. And I think this idea I'm just telling you needs to be brought through the children to the decision makers. I'm in various boards like Future Earth and all this international scientific advisory. One idea I've never really made public like here is still pending, and I was always dumbed down and pushed aside because people speak about geoengineering. But the traditional approach, like water works, like has been done in Bhutan, Ulaanbaatar, or in Mexico City 1,000 years ago, we can really forget all about this pipelines for oil, but make pipelines for water and canals for water. We have so many depressions in the world where the atmosphere would get the too much sea level rise immediately into this depression. Large areas between Egypt and some Libya, in the Danakil Desert, in Somalia, in the Red Sea and Dead Sea. I mean, now I'm speaking about the Dead Sea. We could really put it like with a lever on and off. And if you see through pumping, we could even get it to the Aral Sea or large lakes in Africa, which are all dry. We have to really refill the humidity and the vegetation, because then we have a climate cycle and we could really fill the aquifers. But I didn't want to give a lecture. I was so excited that we came to the term of revolution, and doing it by us, bottom up, has nothing to do with education. That's why we do Youth for Planet.
10 years ago, Heiner, I worked on geoengineering for 3 years. On land, we have moved rivers, like in China and other places. There are atmospheric rivers in the sky where 97% of the rain falls on the ocean. There is no reason why we cannot find the technology to move those rivers. And for anyone listening, Aqueous, AQIESS. If you type that with my name, there are about 10 videos of the bringing the rain to Somalia. So please take a look at that. But you're right, we need to find ways to overcome the scarcity of water. I have a question, Daniel. I see you are holding your face. Please tell us how your passion for e-learning can be used to educate the parents, the teachers, the professors, the governments, the civil society. That's one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is to reach out to the youth. But the first aspect is critical, not only in e-learning for knowledge and information about issues, but changing their mindsets. What can you comment on that, please?
Sure. Our discussion is very, very valuable. However, like 99% of people would say that, well, it's those, nature type of activists, we would be profiled for our discussion and treated not seriously in this, broad society. Our members of parliament, of government, they don't care about this issue. They are not even aware. And, the problem is, how do we share this real problem? How do we communicate it to everyone and we activate them on the problem? Once we know that there is a problem, they need to give them, the knowledge, what we can do about it, what we should do. Right now, what happens to be is that there are a lot of, let's say, a lot of climate action that is trickled down through organizations from the central government, through all those bodies and even NGOs, and they try to communicate one aspect of it. That, for example, you should do recycling, or you should, sort your rubbish into different containers. And nobody actually shows the big picture, why it has to happen and how this particular, initiative contributes to the bigger picture. Therefore, people are, overwhelmed by all these many things that they should do, but they do not understand that we need to do something big in order to, have big impact. So that's what I'm thinking, how do we communicate all of this? How do we change the mindset? And we need attention, but then we need knowledge. I think it should be mandatory, for government employees, first of all, for the government employees, because if this is spaceship Earth, there should be a captain, and then the captain can enact, the rules, and everyone should follow. But this is not exactly a spaceship Earth. There is no captain. There are maybe many captains. There are warring factions, etc. Therefore, we cannot agree. If there would be one captain, it would be easy. But, thinking about the government entities, how come we cannot enforce at least government employees to learn mandatorily about sustainable development? because all of them, all of the government employees have required learning plans. You know, they have to upgrade their knowledge like by, I don't know, some 10, 20 hours a year. And by the way, according to the newest research, just in order to keep up with your work, you have to now invest 32 hours of learning a year, you know, just to stay at the same level. It used to be 4 hours just a decade before. So we are accelerating at the pace at which we have to learn new skills, because the world is changing, the world is accelerating. So I'm just saying that why on earth we cannot make those people learn this important information? Because you know, if you think about education system, it's not really voluntary, it's mandatory. You cannot really skip kindergarten or school, or well, you can skip university, maybe those later stages, but education system is mandatory. We had it for 100 plus years, and it has been the greatest thing ever. Right now, a lot of people are condemning that it's all type of you know, system, but you know, in essence, it has worked. You know, it has transitioned the world into a different place. Now we just need to fix it, upgrade it, etc. But maybe you know, we should use this force to make people learn about sustainable development. When I was in Rio plus 20, you know, we have included just 2 words, informal and non-formal education on sustainable development. This is like what all the world's youth has fought to include these 2 words during that summit. And why that was important? Because then it opens up the funding for all of the organizations that do non-formal and informal education on sustainable development. But I guess the bigger problem is that the formal curriculum does not have enough of it, and even the teachers and government employees that work with it do not have enough information. And I was the most amazed in Rio Plus 20 that the government clerks that were responsible for drafting those documents, the outcome documents, they couldn't even properly inform the country leaders what the problem is. So then you could hear, you know, the country leaders reading some kind of bullshit statements, you know, about how many trees per square kilometer they have, and in this particular metric, the best in the world. That's we are great, everyone else, you know, is bad. So that was really ridiculous. Anyways, so we have education system. Let's use it. And right now, it's more accessible than ever because of those online technologies. But to answer to the second part of your question about how to motivate the young people, we're at a point in time that we have unprecedented opportunities technologically that we can even pay people to learn. You know, really, there is no problem to pay people to learn this important information. You know, and we have blockchain projects, cryptocurrency projects that are rising, and they are creating value out of thin air just by creating a behavioral shift in people. So in-game currencies, in-game computer game currencies appreciate thousandfold just because people start using something. It's completely feasible to create such a design for sustainable development education and pay people to learn what really matters. We just need to change all of the incentives. And this is the key of education. You have to have the proper incentives, then the tools can work to fulfill your mission, basically, to educate those people. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Danielius. We will connect. Samuel, are you there? Samuel? Caroline, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I'll just kind of talk off of your last question for Danielius. Just about how, I guess I'll talk more about how to motivate youth, since I'm coming from that perspective. I think that a lot of it.
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
I'll let Samuel go ahead.
Samuel, I'll give you the floor. Daniela is talking.
Can you hear me?
Caroline is talking. Caroline, please hold, because from Nigeria the connection is difficult. Samuel, you have the floor. Samuel, because it's difficult to connect from Nigeria. We can hear you, Samuel. Go ahead, Samuel. Samuel, turn off your video, because then the connection will be fine from Nigeria. Samuel? Hello?
I think he froze. Maybe go back to Caroline.
Caroline,
I really
go
love
ahead.
what Daniel said earlier on about okay.
Go ahead.
I said I really love what Daniel said about okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I am speaking. I don't know if you could hear me from there.
Yes.
I think the connection is bad here anyway. So I think
No, go ahead. That's working. Hold it next to your mouth.
yes, please.
Go ahead. Okay, Caroline, you have the floor. Go on, Caroline.
Okay. So back to how youth are motivated to kind of start on this action. I think that it kind of branches off of each other, at least particularly for myself and for the peers that I've worked with. We're motivated by each other, by coming together. So I think that one of the best ways to kind of get youth to be motivated for climate action is to create these groups, such as like the POP movement that I mentioned that I'm part of. And I know that there's various groups across like all different countries, but of youth coming together. And we see from the Fridays for Future movement with Greta Thunberg, everybody is kind of following her and they're gathering in groups to come up and kind of strike. So I think that the best way that youth can create this difference and also show our government leaders to take action is by gathering together and speaking to the government leaders, and then also showing strikes and kind of showing our not necessarily our fear really for that this crisis is going to harm our futures. And I believe that I guess it's our voices need to be heard by the government leaders, and that'll happen by us coming together and talking about these solutions and coming to panels such as these to discuss a way that we can all come to one solution and then kind of.
Thank you. Thank you, Caroline. It's very interesting that this is one of the rarest webinar that I have been in. And it's the first time thanks to Danielius. And this is something that the media needs to pick up. We need to educate the governments. I have never heard this on webinars or in the media, that the governments need to be educated. You gave the example of garbage. They have a beautiful announcement, separate all your garbage. When the garbage truck comes, they put all the stuff in the same truck and mix it all back and take it to the dump site or this incinerator. So it's very important that this aspect needs to be highlighted, that the whole system needs education with the word action at every step of there. And I think this has been the wonderful part of this seminar. Samuel, are you able to come in?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You go ahead and speak, please.
Okay, so I was saying that I really love what Daniel was saying. Yes, I think Daniel, yeah. about the educational curriculum and its implementation processes. And then what I would like to point out is also what Mahendra said. Dr. Mahendra said about the educational revolution, which is very, very much welcomed. But I would like to point out something to us. If we really want to achieve sustainability in our educational sector, not just talking about reform, but talking about revolution, we have to know the people that can drive this action. We have to know the youths, and also we have to recognize their voices as well. Let's say youths at the grassroots level, reasons being that I'll give a simple analogy. If politicians, they want to make something happen in their politics, they don't go on using youths at the top. They go to the grassroots because they know that these are the people that can easily be convinced to do whatever they want to do. So they go on with grassroots. And if we also want to achieve revolution, we have to start from the grassroots. That is the thing. We have to know that at the grassroots, that they have the power to strike the change, and also they can make the change happen if we recognize them, and also those that have the voices to be amplified as well. And then I also want to talk about a project that I'm also currently carrying out that talks about climate education and sustainability, and the need for kids in school to promote sustainability as a lifestyle. This is how the revolution starts. If kids can have that mentality that I should be sustainable from primary school, is going to go to the top as they grow up. So we don't start revolution from the top. I don't know if any of us we are familiar with the EndSARS protest that happened in Nigeria. That should have been a revolution, but it was hijacked. Do you know why? Because the politicians went to the grassroots to use youth that have no idea of what other youths in rural areas are fighting of. So basically, they went to the rural area to get youth to fight those at the urban areas. So if we must promote sustainability and also call for radical change in our educational institution, we must go back to the grassroots. We must go back to the local communities, or else people at the top will help us do that by corrupting their mindset and mentality about the whole issue, and making them fight against us, who are the people that are promoting these goodwill messages. So thank you very much.
Samuel, you just closed the loop. Danielius put on the table to educate the government, and you have now gone to the grassroots. Neither the grassroots can respond, neither the government can respond. And you are the one, the youth, with the mission to go up and to go down and make that connection. And that's a beautiful loop we have. And Danielius, that is also what you are looking at, the two ends of the spectrum. So I think this is a really obvious, but an original thinking, that go to the peasants, what we call through the peasants, because you can convince them. And we've seen that in Mexico, we've seen them all over, that the power lies with the peasants at the bottom. Peasants in some people's minds. Actually, they are the real humans on the ground, protecting nature and everything else. And at the other end is the government that thinks they have the education, but they do not. And that's a bridge we have to make. And the youth need to be fighting for that. Don't fight to put on a suit and get a job in the system. Fight for change. Thank you for this connection. Yuri, how are we doing with time?
I think we're done. It's like 1 hour, 38 minutes now. So I think we're about to wrap it up and finish prepare for the next one. But Heiner wants to say something first.
Go ahead, Heiner.
Just to sum up, I think we have left the youth alone. We had 7 nations, 200 youth of the world, youth leaders already 20
Okay,
years
so
ago.
sorry. Let me say something, and let me just. I don't know. Can I say something?
Say something.
Go ahead, Samuel. Go ahead, Samuel. We're waiting, Samuel.
I think there's a problem of connection, maybe. Heiner?
Yeah.
Okay, I just said we have left the youth alone. They got the best voluntary project by the UN already 20 years ago, but it was not funded. There was no real mentorship to really help them think out of the box and do paradigm mapping. My final word would be, we have to really look into mind, rule, and frame set resets. And that is sometimes painful. And we need the old and new and the elders and the young coming together. And I think for this, it's high time.
Thank you. Thank you, Heiner. Samuel, are you able to speak? Okay, then we wrap it up. I think it's been a really formidable discussion. And Yuri, we should not only put it on the website, I think we need to extract the gems and the diamonds from our discussion and put it out
Have
in
you
the
changed
public
this?
arena. Every one of
You should have
us.
done it now.
Go ahead, Samuel. So we should do that, please, and we will send you a summary of this. We will transcript it, and let us work together, because this really is a webinar. We've gone to the top of the mountain, and now I can also say that we started the journey in the grasslands, and now we've reached the top. So thank you everyone for participating. Danielius, we want you to stay connected with us, and let's exchange ideas, and we would like to combine our efforts with your organization to see how we can both deliver on actions on our mission. So it's a great pleasure to have you, Heiner, as always. At least we meet on Zoom now, and it's time we meet it next door to each other, so we better find some way to do this. Caroline, you continue your warrior. You have left that moment, but don't forget, a warrior once, forever a warrior, especially when it's the environment. Don't go to war otherwise. Samuel, you are back. Samuel, if you hear me, please talk to the Nigerian Telecom.
Yes, I am.
It's the #1 country. It needs to do something about the communication. Go ahead, speak.
Yes.
Please speak. I see your smile. Speak.
I will. I will do that. I will do that. It's something that has been a major issue here in Nigeria. Network issues has often been a major issue for Nigeria here. So I would say that. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh my God. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please speak.
Okay, so I say that I will talk to our telecommunication network here in Nigeria to work on the issue of network and also try to resolve most of these things. But I think it's something that we have to work on. Okay.
Okay, I think it's thank everybody for this presentation. It was amazing. Actually, just one final word. We worked a few years ago with Panasonic on a project that can be used now. They had a project, a global project called Eco-Learning System or Eco-Learning Program, where they taught teachers in different countries. I think it was 24 countries, 26 countries. And those teachers became monitors for the environment, teaching environment. So they had a class plan for the whole planet. Like I said, 26 countries adopted that. So maybe, and they discontinued that in 2015 or a few years ago. But maybe now with this new technology, new apps, and new system that, like Dan said, could even get you paid to be, to learn. That's something we can reinstate. And it worked fine for a few years with Panasonic with this eco-learning program. So now with the next new technology, I don't see why we cannot do the same and take it globally, this learning. We're going to elaborate on that and then get back to you guys. Okay, well, thank you very much for everything. Dr. Mahendra?
Danielius, Caroline, Heiner, David, Kehkashan, thank you all for being you. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.